And change your clothes, Aunt Lillian added. You're having a visitor today. A visitor? Maggie's spine stiffened of its own accord, and she stepped back into the quiet gaze of the man and woman in black and white over the mantel. What visitor? In the past, a visitor had meant a doctor who pried open your clenched teeth with a slab of wood, or a psychologist who asked you to draw a picture of a family and then remained silent when you scribbled a parade of tiny spiders along the bottom of the paper. We have invited a friend for you, Aunt Lillian explained. She is the granddaughter of an acquaintance of ours, and her name is Jeanette. A friend? I don't want a friend. Everyone wants a friend, Aunt Lillian answered. Happy is the house that shelters a friend. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote that. You must read Ralph Waldo Emerson. He will improve your character. Maggie withdrew her hair from her mouth and painted little circles on her cheek with its sharpened point. I don't want a friend, she repeated, backing against the wall. Jeanette is a wholesome child. You need wholesome companions. She is also an accomplished singer. She has the voice of a lark. If you ask her, she will sing for you. I don't want a lark, a friend. I don't want a friend. Jeanette wore her hair in a single heavy braid clasped at top and bottom with purple beads. Her eyes were wide set and brown, and around her wrist she wore a silver chain with a slim oval plate that Maggie knew, without looking, bore the engraving of her name. All the girls at her other schools, the girls with families, not the charity girls like her, had them. Jeanette crossed the room toward her and unexpectedly extended her hand. Maggie had never before shaken hands with anyone, and she remained frozen on the rug. After a long moment, Jeanette pulled Maggie's hand from behind her back and gave it a vicious squeeze. How do you do? She said, and she took a seat next to the window, where she crossed and recrossed her ankles with their straight white socks evenly matched. Maggie sat against the opposite wall and rifled the pages of a copy of National Geographic, glancing at the pictures, birds mostly. She lifted one page to her face and squinted at it with extreme care. Jeanette leaned over and measured the height of one sock against the other. Then she ran her fingernail along the wall, making Maggie's skin freeze. At last she spoke. Do you like actors and actresses? Maggie didn't look up. I don't go to the movies. I mean the game. Maggie turned 3 more pages and came face to face with an owl. I don't play any games, she said eventually. I'm too old for games. I'm older than you, and anyway, it's not the kind of game you play with pieces or anything. It's a talking game. First, I think of an actor, and I give you his initials, and you try to guess who it is. If you guess right, it's your turn. Otherwise, I go again. You want to play? No. Jeanette fell silent and began exploring the room with her eyes. What's that? She finally asked, pausing at the curio cabinet. Maggie turned the page. An ad for t-shirts with pictures of endangered animals printed across their chests. A whale. A whooping crane. What? She asked, not looking up. In that cabinet. Maggie glanced at the china ballerina balancing on one toe and once again longed to run her finger along the edge of its brittle skirt. That's mine, she said. It's a dancer. It's all made of china, even the skirt. No, I mean the elephants on the other shelf. Maggie shrugged. I don't know, they're elephants? They look creepy. This whole house is creepy. How come everything is so dark in here? Everybody says this place is haunted. My brother told me not to come. He said they used to have a boarding school or something here. And then something happened and it's been haunted ever since. Nobody wants to come here except your uncle. And even he doesn't want to come here. My brother says your uncle's crazy. Maggie slowly tore off a piece of her thumbnail and put it in her mouth. Then Uncle Morris didn't live here. He only visited. Where did he live? She turned back to her magazine, and the room fell silent again. Who are those? Jeanette asked after a while. Maggie turned another page. Who? She asked, not looking up. In those pictures. Maggie glanced briefly at the 2 faces in the paintings. I don't know, she said. Ancestors? She returned to her bird pictures. They're dead. She removed the softened thumbnail from her mouth and dropped it to the floor. You want to do something? Jeanette's voice broke through the silence. You want to play a game or what? You want to play Ghost? Maggie jumped slightly. What? Ghost. Maggie turned another page. There's no such thing, she said. No. The word game, dummy. Don't you even know how to play Ghost? No. You spell out words, Jeanette said. First I say a letter, and then you say a letter, and you keep on going until you spell a word. Then if the word ends up on you, you get the G for ghost. And the first person who gets ghost is out. Suppose I say B. Now you say a letter. Maggie studied a picture of an island filled with black and white birds with triangular red bills. Say a letter, Jeanette insisted. P, Maggie finally said. What word is that supposed to be? Puffin, it's a bird. But I already said B, so? So there's no word that begins BP. You get G for ghost. You're 1/5 of a ghost. There's no such thing. Jeanette inserted a finger into her sock and slowly scratched the back of her heel. You know why I don't go to the same school as you, she asked. Because I go to a performing arts school. I'm training to be a concert singer and I'm going to go on tour and stuff. I study voice. Voice is what you study when you're going to be a singer. The tone of her voice was familiar, and Maggie recognized it as the one she used when she addressed her 5 little girls from the backwoods. That's a lie, she said. There was silence in the room for a long moment, and then Jeanette suddenly burst out. I know all about you. My grandmother told me. She told me your mother and father were killed in a car crash or something, and you've been thrown out of a whole bunch of boarding schools and foster homes, and finally your aunts took you because no one else wanted you. And they had to because they're relatives. Maggie flipped the pages of the magazine quickly and stopped suddenly at a glossy study of a brown and gray bird. It had speckles on its creamy breast, and it resembled a sparrow more than anything else. But in flight, it took command of the entire page, and the trees in the distance were small and vague beneath the spread of its wings. It was a lark, the caption said, an old world lark, and she could see by its open beak that it was in full song. In a moment she had ripped the page in half and then in half again, so that she had 4 fluttering strips of broken wings and fragmented feathers. These she crushed into solid balls, and walking, almost marching, step, stop, across the room, she reached Jeanette's frozen figure and in a quick movement pressed the crumpled bird hard against her mouth. A soft cry rose like the cry of a rubber doll when Maggie had pressed its face the day before, and Jeanette's face flamed. I think you're rotten, Jeanette whispered, pulling the pieces of paper from her lips. You're rotten, she said. You're the rottenest person I've ever met. I'm glad your mother and father are dead. I'd feel sorry for them having to live with you. She began moving away. I'm glad you have to live in this creepy house with your aunts. A few bits of paper still clung to her mouth, and Maggie saw a part of a beak on one tooth, and on another a piece of wing. And you can't hurt me by staring at me like that either. I don't have to look at you at all. I don't have to look at you ever again, in fact. I don't have to come back here. I only came because my grandmother made me, and I'm never coming again. Never, never, never. Aunt Harriet and Aunt Lillian were suddenly standing at the parlor door, and the 2 girls sprang apart. What's happening here? One of them asked. What's that all over the floor? It's a game, Maggie answered slowly. A game? What sort of game is it that requires you to strew paper all over the rug? Maggie picked up some of the shreds from the floor. Ghost, she answered, throwing the torn bits of wings and beak into the fireplace beneath the 2 portraits with their pale faces and distant eyes.